buong laot, kunyari pang tulog. Sinubo na ang buong itlog, manturukot, tumatakbong pasikot-sikot. Patikin naman ang kayamanan, patikin naman ang kayamanan, patikin naman ang kayamanan, patikin naman ang kayamanan. Mariosep, wala pang kebero keps, nalunod na ang buong lungsod. Lahat ng tao kumain na ng uod. Kala mo umuusbong, ito na pala katapusan ng sulong. Lahat sila nagsasalita ng papulong, dapat lahat sila ay kulong. Patikin naman ang kayamanan, patikin naman ang kayamanan, patikin naman ang kayamanan, patikin naman ang kayamanan, patikim naman ng kayamanan, patikim naman ng kayamanan, patikim naman ng kayamanan, patikim naman ng kayamanan.
I was invited to speak about this ministerial right. As Joseph, you said, we were actually pushing to get it postponed because it was turning so damaging, and not only on agriculture, but on fisheries subsidies, but also on, the pandemic process and the waiver on all fronts. Poorer countries and, more marginalized groups within developing countries were going to lose out. So it has been postponed. That is great news, but I think it only extends our fight, which means the fight goes on. I mean, it's not like we do not relax even for a day. But let me just say a few words then on agriculture. I mean, it's been a history of betrayal, I would say, especially on agriculture, because developing countries were, lured into the WTO with the promise of agriculture, because they were told that, when you join WTO, okay, developing countries, you all export, you have interest in agriculture exports. So yes, you can export to our markets, to Western country markets. And US, EU and Switzerland, Canada, Japan, they were giving huge subsidies. And they said, yes, we will discipline these subsidies under WTO rules. And you can participate as equal partners. You can shape the rules. We will cut subsidies, so you will be able to actually get exports markets for your products. This was, in a way, the promise. And this is why, one is why many developing countries joined the WTO, and also they signed on to the TRIPS agreement. As many of you know, we are fighting on the waiver, right? The TRIPS agreement protects technologies related to vaccines and medicines, and we have been hurt by that. But why did developing countries sign the TRIPS agreement? Because they thought they would gain in agriculture. But now, 26 years down the line, we know the TRIPS agreement has hurt us, and the agreement on agriculture continues to hurt us, our farmers, our food security, our biodiversity, our local production, especially production by small producers, by indigenous peoples, by women. And it has really hurt this around the developing world. actually. But let me quickly just flag some of the current issues. As you know, I mean, so what was on the table in the ministerial? You know, I think many of you know that since 2012, we are fighting on what is called this public stockholding proposal. Many of our countries, you know, we are like, these are developing countries, we run huge food programs. India has the public distribution system, Indonesia has the Bullock program, Philippines, Malaysia. I mean, most of our countries have very large food programs which are essential for ensuring food security. But unless they also support small producers and production, you cannot run such public programs. But the moment governments give a subsidy on a price support, you know, they give these programs often buy from farmers at a support price, where they're, you know, they're giving them a guaranteed market that whatever is the cost, we will cover the cost of farmers and we will buy, and this will then support this public food program. But because WTO had absolutely irrational, very unfair rules that these subsidies are called trade distorting, and the WTO makes very strict rules that developing countries must must, you know, limit it to 10% of value of agricultural production. So for every product, for wheat, whatever is the value of production, you cannot give more than 10% of that value in a year as subsidy. This is turning out to be a major problem. Indonesia, India, Kenya, Egypt, Turkey, Tunisia, across the world. Pakistan, like many countries have faced this problem that they are exceeding this subsidy limit, because it's a very artificial, very irrationally calculated also, this subsidy. So from 2012, they've been fighting to say that let us give these subsidies to farmer, because these are essential subsidies for supporting, one is, you know, farmers' livelihoods. And we've seen during COVID, these livelihoods have got challenged, our food security has got challenged. So the fight has only become deeper and stronger for this ministerial. We got something like an interim peculiar, like a mechanism in 2013 in the Bali ministerial, which said that, okay, these subsidies are still bad, but no country will sue you. But this was not good enough, because this had many conditions, you know, like conditions so bad that we actually cannot use that program. So countries, developing countries, have been fighting to get a permanent solution. This was one of the key issues, key things to be delivered in the WTO. It was supposed to be delivered by 2017. But even now, this year, we were shocked to see the last text that came out just before the ministerial was postponed. 2 days before that, a chair's text came out. And they have, not a surprise, again pushed this issue to next ministerial. And they keep pushing it because the rich countries, US and all, they actually want to sell to our markets. They want to, you know, even they think our food programs should be run with food produced by their big agribusiness, not our small farmers. We want our farmers with local production, they should run the food program. But US, Canada, EU, they have major export interests. They want to take over our agriculture markets. And that's why they do not want our subsidies to continue. The other issue was the special safeguard mechanism. You know, sometimes we face this huge surge in imports. If suddenly a flood of export comes, say from EU, European rice, our farmers would be finished. They kind of just do subsistence farming. If 1 year they have tremendous loss, they cannot farm next year. But the fact is, they have again blocked this special safeguard mechanism. But the interesting thing is, they have totally turned around the whole discussion on agriculture. So agriculture, it was something that developing countries, as I said, it was in their interest. They were fighting for it. You know, they were fighting to get good rules. But now we see on the opposite side, we are under attack. Our subsidies are being challenged. And now, you know, developing countries said that Western countries should discipline their subsidies, because they have, what they managed to get is a lot of concession for their own subsidies. They've managed to continue to give huge subsidies, which are very damaging. So developing countries have been saying, you should cut those subsidies. Those are hurting farmers in developing countries. There's a lot of evidence that it is happening. But what they are now saying is, oh, if we discuss this, you have to cut even, we get something called development box subsidies, which is special subsidies we can give for development purpose. They are saying you cut that subsidy also. So they have managed to turn around even the whole agriculture discussion, whatever issues were of interest for us, they have pushed it to the backbench, and whatever issues are against our interest, they are pushing it mercilessly. They are also pushing for more, import duty cuts. Like they are saying, using COVID, they said cut import duties, we will give you food. So what they were trying to do, liberalize, they are now using COVID to do that. They are saying because of COVID, do not have import duties, we will sell you food. So they want to actually do more market liberalization. They are also using this transparency. They're saying we need to be more transparent, do more notification, which is very difficult for our countries to do. Do we spend on, doing transparency notification, or do we spend on COVIDs? So basically, they have given us a very hard choice. All the critical issues they have actually pushed out, and they are actually continuously pushing market access, transparency, and even this domestic support, which was about disciplining and cutting rich country subsidies. They have totally turned around the domestic support discussion and have made it about attacking developing country subsidies, essential input subsidies, investment subsidies, which we give to our farmer. So this is where we are. Like there's nothing to be gained as we have. I mean, we have tremendous fight on the agriculture front. I mean, many of us, we still hang in there because the WTO is the only place where subsidies can be disciplined, and they are hurting us worldwide, hurting our farmers, hurting our production. But frankly, it looks kind of, bleaker and more difficult every year. And protest inside and outside, we need to continuously oppose and challenge and actually really attack and challenge them. We have to take the fight into their court because we are always under attack. Thank you so much, Joseph.
Thanks for the this opportunity to share about the fishery subsidies and the WTO agreements. So thanks for the previous speaker, Rajana Sengupta, briefing about the WTO agreements, which disposes the rights of the fishers as well as the small as well as the marginal farmers. So regarding the fisheries subsidies and WTO, so WTO agreement and fisheries subsidies concentrate on the core focus is that SDG goal 14, which is the life below the water, and it is more focused on WTO. It is on the SDG 14.6, which talks about discipline the subsidies for illegal, unreported and unregulated IUU fishing, and also overfished stocks, and also overfishing and overcapacity fishers in the developing and least developing countries. So largely WTO subsidies are concentrated on the fisheries resource, not on the fishers as such. It is about the resource, fisheries resource, and they are concerned about the life below the water, the resource, because that resource gives them the revenue, that resource gives them the that resource being a capital for them, giving more and more export revenue and more profit out of it. Rather, they are not concerned about the life above the water and the life in the land, the fishers in the coast, and the fishers who fish, the fishers, the fish workers, the small scale, the small marginalized coastal communities, the resource dependent poors. They are not concerned about that. So their concern is only about the life below the water, not life above the water. So coming back to that, we are I have been representing the capture fishers in large. Capture fishers. We are not producing anything, but we are capturing the fish, and we are been providing to the entire globe the wild capture fishes, the wild capture fish and the wild capture prawns. So taking this WTO subsidies debates, differential treatments in the fisheries, and I have been if you come back with the if you superimpose the WTO subsidies in in the context of India, let me share about from our Indian context of this WTO agreements, which will be very easy to understand that how it disposes and how it diminishes the presence of small scale fishers and the resource poor fisheries resource poor coastal communities in large. So first of all, what is that? Their concern is about in India, it is largely the territorial waters in the sea. When you talk about the life below the water in the sea, it is the 0 to 12 nautical miles, the territorial waters, and 13 to 200 nautical miles is the exclusive economic zone, not a fishing zone. It is an exclusive economic zone. That's what the United UNCLOS differentiate. So when it comes to the state like a union state like India, the 12 nautical mile 0 to territorial waters comes to the state governments, the regional governments, and the 13 to 200 nautical miles comes to the union central government. So understanding this WTO subsidies, which is now what is happening in India is that India is coming understand to make the WTO agreements to fit to the commitments to the WTO agreements as well as to the other global agreements. What they are trying to say is that they are coming with one policy called National Fisheries Policy. National Fisheries Policy 2021, which is come in the period of Corona, to revisit or reconstruct the fisheries subsidies. So what they are saying is that they will lease out the territorial waters 0 to 12 nautical miles for culture fisheries, because fish is already overstocked as per the WTO agreements. So they want to farm fish, so that they are going to lease out or rent out the entire territorial waters through their marine spatial planning to different non-fishers who are not involved in fishing. So they want to, they are satisfied, they have a mission of transferring 20% of the capture fisheries to culture fisheries. So to solve this illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing, to solve overfished stocks, to solve this overfishing agenda, WTO is giving all the subsidies with the false solution called culture fisheries to farm fish and eat more fish. This is not food sovereignty. This is where the food security comes in. Food sovereignty is protect the resources, but here it is not at all. It is going to cleanse the identity of the capture fisheries, diminish the identity, disposes them from the resources of the territorial waters in the sea and in the EEZ, and it is going to bring the other green labeled monster for farming in the sea. So they are going to lease out these resources. This is one policy, national fisheries policies. The other policy is that 13 to 200 nautical mile, they have their national blue economy policy. Blue economy policy is about, we all know, it is the larger components of all the corporates inside it, oil mining, because it is an exclusive economic zone. So all the business components, life below the water, oil mining, industrial fishing, all the components are there. This is the other status. This is the other policy, which is also been through the marine spatial planning. They are also leasing out the EEZ waters. So where will we fish? Where we can fish? How does the marginal fishers or the fishers, marginal fishers and the capture fisheries, does they have the right over the resources? This is what the false solutions of culture fisheries has been dominating the policies of national fisheries policies of India. India and the other small, not only here, the other island nations, small and developing nations, the same principle has been kept as a to commit to fulfill the commitments of WTO subsidies. They have been branding us that we have been overfished the stocks, and they have been bringing this culture fisheries agenda to the large. So in both these policies, now to implement the policies, now they are bringing in India, Indian Marine Fisheries Bill 2000, and it is going to place in the present parliament. This bill does not allow a small fisher to cross 13 territorial waters to the EEZs. They are going to, this is a central, this is a union government act, which is going to regulate the fishers in such a way, in the name of IUU fishing, illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing. So these are how the acts and policies are being devised to diminish the rights of the small scale fishers, to dispose the rights of the small scale fishers, customary rights of the small scale fishers in the sea. This is how the capture fisheries has been diminished throughout the globe. For example, the recent UN Food Summit is also been pushing about for culture fisheries, so-called mariculture, sea farming in the sea. So this is how the false solutions of farming has been put on us, not only here. And if you see the global statistics of the fisheries resources, the entire statistic says that there is no fish in the sea. This itself a huge climate change cry, because if there is no fish in the sea, it is not a pond, it is a sea. So this is what how the other trade agreements for seafood markets and the global corporates have been pushing, and that has been channelized through this the WTO subsidies. So this subsidies cut or the subsidies WTO subsidies, which has been, if you see the history of India also, has been divided our mechanized and small scale, mechanized and capture fisheries into mechanized and traditional fishers. So already the conflict is there. Now the in the name of that, in the name of mariculture and culture fisheries, now the new giant is coming in, green giant is coming in. This is how in practical, how this subsidies and the agreement discussions, which are not, as the previous speaker said, irrational, they can't think out of their doors, how it will be implicate the small and the poor who are the resource dependent, protecting the resources. So this is how capture fisheries has been dismantled or disintegrated from the entire resources of the sea. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Terima kasih.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the time. My name is Siti Inaya. I'm a women peasants cadre from Indonesia Peasants Union. I have a simple questions. Can we stop WTO? That's my questions. Thank you.
That is the $20 million question.
Itu merupakan
Siti. So the question of Siti is, can we stop the WTO? Ranja, like a veteran of these fights, is it possible? And have we, in the presentation of Henry a while ago, he spoke about golden moments, no? Moments in our history of our struggle that have propelled us forward. What do you think? How should we respond to a question like that? Whether it's possible to stop the WTO and its agenda?
As you said, Joseph, it is a $20 million question. But I think, you know, we've had moments to completely change the narrative. I mean, when in fact, the dispute settlement mechanism was blocked by the Trump administration, we thought, great, that's the end of the WTO and its bad rules. But I think we have to do a lot of hard work here. We actually have to push our governments to use those moments to either, get out of the WTO. But if you get out of the WTO, Siti, we also have to think what is the alternative mechanism because countries will trade, right? There are countries who do not have enough food, enough products. They will need, like, whoever has extra sells to them. So trade, we need fair and just rules of trade. We do not want to be bound by these horrible rules that the WTO is forcing us to adopt. But we also then have to think what will be this alternative place? How will we shape it? Where, it may be based on development justice, on human rights, on the values that we want. So there's been a lot of thinking about alternative institutions, but frankly, we have not managed to get our energy and act together to be able to really make those alternative institutions the one instead of the WTO. We have not really managed to turn the WTO upside down. And frankly, from what we see, it is actually getting stronger. We were thinking in the middle, it's getting weaker, but we see that the developed countries are coming back with very, very bad stuff. Like some of the things I couldn't discuss, like e-commerce, they're getting these digital trade rules. And be sure that this will have huge impact on agriculture sector. Very soon, you already hear, right, that I think in Singapore, Panasonic is doing agriculture food production totally digitized and no farmer is involved. Very soon, our farmers will be kicked out and the e-commerce rules and digital corporations will be doing our food production. So they are pushing more and more bad stuff and very, very strongly. And we are not able to get the things that we want, agriculture, good rules on fisheries to protect actually small fishers' livelihoods and food security, and also TRIPS waiver. We are still able to get access to technology so we can produce our vaccines, the vaccines that we need. Yes, but we all think simultaneously need to also think what other institution will work. Sorry, I'm having some carpenter work done in my house, so there's a lot of background noise. I will stop.
Thank you, Ranja. Let me call on Shal Mali Gutal. Shal, you want a comment? You want to comment or another question?
Yeah, I have a question to everybody, really, and it may be, maybe we can take this up later. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So
Yes.
the thing is, I mean, I completely understand what Ranja is saying. And firstly, let me just congratulate Via Campesina for the absolutely brilliant videos that we've been seeing, because it's really very important for us to remember how we built the resistance. Resistance doesn't just fall out of the sky, it was built together. And it's a combination of social movements and researchers and activists, all the way from academics to Third World Network to focus to, grassroots groups from different walks of life. So thank you. And thank you also, Ranja, for your excellent update. So my question here now is that, given how bad things are in the WTO, and given the proliferation of free trade and investment agreements, and the politicization of this whole global governance, many of us continue to get criticized for saying, end the WTO. The WTO is the only place where you can have multilateral negotiations, et cetera, et cetera. And to a large extent, that is true, because it is a multilateral platform. But things are so bad there. So now there is this bizarre situation that do we have to defend the WTO against the other FTAs? And, so maybe we need a different kind of strategizing, perhaps, so we can think about this throughout this in other parts. What do we do in terms what do we do to actually be able to hold the WTO and other FTAs to the same standards? Because the WTO standards are not any particularly good. I mean, many researchers and even governments think the WTO is a place to be because you can have multilateral rules-based trade, but we know that the rules have been against us, the terms of trade have been against us. So would anybody like to comment on that? And would any of the social movements also like to comment on this? I don't know. I'm just putting this out there, basically that. Thank you.
Thanks, Shal. Maybe I'll ask Jones. Jones, a while ago, you mentioned how, this push for changes in national policies in India, and this more or less the corporate agenda underpinning this push, right, is really something that fishers, particularly small capture fishers, are opposing. Do you have an insight or a reflection on the question that Shal mentioned? Are you there, Jones?
Yeah, I'm there.
Yes.
See, that's what thing is that their whole aim is to extract revenue out of the resource. Can you come back with that? Because my net. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, Jones, we can hear you. We can hear you, Jones. Go ahead.
So their aim is particularly on getting revenue out of the resources. So rather, if you see that IUU fishing and other things, as I said, there is another output as culture fisheries, overfish stocks and other things, and they are doing culture fisheries, and their other way around, they are getting revenue out of the resource. So that how does this, because here you are going to, one side you are going to subjugate the rice and rights of small farmers, but the ultimate aim is not that. WTO agreement ultimate is to get revenue out of it. So I think from that angle, as that this will multiple, the capital will change its status or status of mind. It is like amoeba, it will change accordingly and it will use. That's what, whether I am right or what is exact.
But as you were saying a while ago, this pressure is not only coming from the WTO, right? You mentioned, for example, the UN Food System Summit, sort of advancing that corporate agenda as well. Yeah. Okay, we have a few more minutes for this open forum segment, let me squeeze in.
Did I answer the question?
Yes,
What?
yes.
Ah.
Yes. Thanks, Jones. Okay, so there's a question from LVC. Let me just read it. Why should we believe in this quote? There is no alternative to the WTO argument. It's like saying there is no alternative to capitalism. What is the role of UNCTAD or the initiatives like ALBA here? Can't ASEAN or SAARC come together to form a multilateral alternative? Why should we even have a WTO based in Geneva, so far away from the world's reality? Maybe we need a multilateral body for the world, headquartered in Africa, Asia, or Latin America. So that's the question from our chat box. We'll end this round, maybe Ranja and Jones and the other speakers. Is Bang Henry in the call as well? Want to address that question before we close this round? Ranja, you want to chime in on that point you were discussing earlier about institutions and the need for alternative institutions? What is the development in that front? I mean, there was a time when this discussion of ALBA and regional alternatives were quite popular within the progressive movements, but I don't know what happened now. What is the state now of those demands for alternative institutions? Ranja?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a very difficult battle to find these alternate institutions. And yes, we need to really think of what this alternative, how we can make that work and really get it going, I would say. But UNCTAD, for example, now you will see the research that comes out of UNCTAD, etc., is very, very neoliberal, because all the disappointment with the UN bodies is they are also now going to the big corporations to fund themselves. The UN has no money, apparently, and they are the different agencies are competing with each other to get funds from the corporations. So UNCTAD's entire work has become very, very problematic. It's just, one division on globalization, which is still actually holding on to the voice that we really need. But yes, I mean, I think how do we strengthen UNCTAD and all? Problem is UNCTAD bodies, they do not make rules. Like they just do research. They are supposed to do just research and so on. But I think constructively within the UN system, provided we can ensure the private corporation influence is not there in the UN, maybe that's where, and I would in fact think of some of the human rights forums to where to take this, and trade discussion becomes actually subservient to those objectives of human rights and development, sustainable development, development justice, and so on. And I know we have been struggling to work on these alternatives, but what I mean, the way we have approached it, some of us work within these institutions because these things keep going on, right? Till we have managed to completely stop this institution from doing anything. They are going on with their policy making, creating more damage. So I think we need to go inside to jam it and protest from inside. And then we need the big struggles and movements and campaigns like yours outside, who keep saying that, sorry, this is not acceptable to us. We want another institutions. Yeah.
Thanks,